Fantastic. Yeah, I think we just show the slides, Devon, and we'll jump in and we'll introduce ourselves as we go here. But we're excited to be here.
All right.
Right. So yeah, we'll just say good morning, good evening, good day, and welcome to AR and VR 101, a primer on the what, why, and how. So, I don't know about you, but I've sat through way too many of these tech presentations that, they go too fast, they use too many buzzwords, and they're just a barrage of, concepts flashing across the screen. So tonight, we're really going to try to break it down to simple terms and share real life examples, because we want to get your wheels turning about how you might apply this new technology appropriately to improve performance. So I'm a big believer that as, performance consultants, we really need to keep pace with technology so that we know when it's the right solution and when it's the wrong solution. So we don't need to be programmers, we don't need to work in the code, but we sure need to, know what the technology will do and when we should use it. So I'm Lisa Toenniges, and I'm the owner and CEO for Innovative Learning Group. We're here in Michigan. And our elevator speech goes something like, we create custom training and tools to help employees do their jobs more effectively. So we help large corporations with their learning strategy, and including the tech strategy and the measurement strategy. And we also build an awful lot of custom training, whether it's ILT or VILT or thousands of e-learning courses, and now, of course, AR and VR. So I also have a real long history with ISPI going back to the late 80s when I was in grad school. And I'm a past president here in Michigan, and also was on the board of the society for 5 years as the treasurer and also the president. So excited too now to introduce Devon.
Hi, everyone.
So Devon is our AR and VR development lead. Devon has a degree in electrical and computer engineering. So Devon's going to answer all of the hard questions tonight. All right, let's jump right in. So our agenda for tonight is we're going to answer questions like, what are AR and VR and why would you use them? We're going to talk about some common use cases. We're going to look at the most used hardware and software development tools. We're going to talk about the necessary skills that you need to get going with this technology. And then we'll actually talk through a roadmap to get you started. Now, I think, you're going to find that tonight's going to be a super great overview. But these technologies, you really have to experience them for yourself. So I would encourage you to, if you haven't experienced them already, try to find a friend, a neighbor, somewhere in your corporation where you can try these, because it kind of the light bulb comes on once you give it a try yourself. I think also, I think Scott set a nice tone for the night. We're going to keep it real informal. So anytime you have a question, feel free to put it in chat, and Mark and Scott will help us make sure we don't miss anything there. Or just come off mic and shout out your question, because again, we can keep it nice and informal with this size group. All right, so we're curious a little bit who's in the audience relative to your experience with AR and VR. So if you want to just put it the letter in the chat, we'll scan quickly. But if you had to answer this question, what are AR and VR? Would you say A, I don't have the faintest idea? Or would you say B, I can say a few words, but not much more? I see some C's coming up, pretty knowledgeable, but not much hands-on experience. Anyone say D, I've worked on small projects? Anyone saying E, I'm an expert and I could give this presentation? All right.
It comes across as a Will Thalheimer survey question.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right, so we got B, C, C, A, B, B. All right, E. Thank you, Mark. If we keel over, we'll know we can go to you. All right, we have one more poll question because now we're interested about kind of the organizations that you either are part of or maybe they're clients of yours. So, again, in the chat, does your organization use AR or VR? A, not at all. B, we've been discussing it, but no action. C, we're identifying concrete use cases. D, we're developing a pilot. Or E, these technologies are an integral part of our blended learning offerings. I want to work there. All right. So a nice mix, but I don't think I saw any, I didn't see any E's. Did I see any D's?
Mostly A and B for this one.
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. Well, good. We'll have some good discussion then, and we'll, like I said, we'll get your wheels turning. All right, so here we go then. So what is AR or augmented reality? So AR is when you are looking through a device to add additional information. It's like adding a layer of information. So with AR, you're still aware of your surroundings. You know where you are, but you're using some type of device to enhance your understanding of that situation, okay? So you're essentially supplementing the real world with digital information through some type of visual interface. So if we look on the screen here in the upper left corner, imagine that is your living room, and imagine that that's your hand and your smartphone. And what you're doing is you're trying to figure out, if you bought that brown chair, what would it look like in your living room? So you basically have a living room with a bare spot, but you're using augmented reality to add a layer of information to get a sense of what that situation would look like. If we go to the upper right corner, now the device that you're looking through is a tablet. So you have a little bit bigger real estate, and you are seeing a motor, all right? But with the AR, you can get additional information about that motor. Again, another layer. Now, if you look on the bottom middle screen here, we have our medical professional, and it looks like she's looking at an X-ray, I believe. And she's getting additional information now through her glasses. So the glasses are her device, and the glasses are what's providing the layer of information. All right, so at the simplest, with AR, it modifies your perception of what you're looking at. Now, if we contrast to AR and we look at VR or virtual reality, well, what is this? So with virtual reality here, you're wearing this headset, and like you see here with this gentleman, he's wearing it on his head. And here, once you put on that headset, you are completely immersed or transported. So in this example, it looks like, they were transported to New Zealand, maybe something from The Hobbit. Probably in our work, it would be more something like a manufacturing plant or a surgery room, or maybe even inside a piece of equipment, right? Because with VR, you can look around in any direction, you can walk, you can hear audio, you can talk, you can touch things. But once you're in that world, you are no longer where you started. You completely kind of lose that sense of where you are, and you're transported. But the great thing about being immersed is you're immersed in that new environment, and it gives you that new context. And we all know, how important that new context is for learning. All right, so as you see on this screen, with VR, we can use hand controls along with that headset. So these really let you interact with objects. You can pick up objects, you can move them, you can manipulate them. So imagine that this really helps engage the learner and simulate real world tasks. Okay, so now you have a sense of what these words mean. How do we use AR and VR? So on the left side of the screen, we're suggesting that AR, because you can add that layer of information, AR is great for performance support. Think, in the flow. I'm going along, I'm doing a task and I get stuck. So AR might just be the perfect solution. On the right side, then you see that VR is.
For you guys, well, boy, there's no email.
Oh, do you have a question?
George, I think you have an open mic.
There you go. Okay. I wanted to make sure you didn't have a question, George. All good. All right. So VR then is good for skill building, right? Because again, we can actually simulate doing a task. You can move around, you can use those hands on your hand controls. So it's great for skill building. All right. So let's talk about some good uses now for this technology. One is when more information is needed in the flow of work. So imagine you are a new employee, you're going through your onboarding, perhaps you're standing in the lobby of the corporate headquarters, you look up on the wall and you see a big photo or portrait of the founder of the company. You can literally hold up your device and get another layer of information. So maybe the biography of that founder or the history of the company. So just by using your device on the portrait, you get a layer of information. In the second bullet then, AR might be good when, say, providing options isn't really convenient. Imagine you're at a vehicle, a car, a truck, kind of dealership showroom. And on the showroom floor is, say, a white SUV. And you've always, not really seen yourself as a white person from a vehicle standpoint, and you want to understand, well, what would that look like if it were in red? All right. So you can, again, maybe the salesperson hands you their tablet, you look through the tablet, you add that layer of information, and you can see what the vehicle looks like in red. All right. It's not convenient, right, for a dealership to have on the showroom floor every different color and model. So the third bullet then, when hands-free operation is needed. I think here, imagine if you're a repair person and maybe you have to repair an elevator. So you could perhaps have some glasses on so your hands are free, and then the glasses could help prompt you with the procedure or the troubleshooting tips just for that elevator. You can imagine there's probably different kinds of elevators. And so the glasses could help you with the specific brand of where the elevator you're in. Those make sense? All right. So if we then look at some good examples for VR, the first one, right? And I'm thinking of this for Lamb or George, Lamb said he was in construction, for when work conditions are dangerous. I mean, think about, say, flying a plane, right? Super high stakes. And I think too, if you were the learner, it would sure alleviate a lot of just your fears early on in learning something new and so dangerous like that, to be trying it out and practicing it in the headset first. The second bullet then talks about when recreations of scenarios is expensive. Imagine if you had a large piece of equipment, and so far right now it's only available on the other side of the world, but it's coming to your side of the world soon. So perhaps you could use VR to get up to skill on that, and then you would be ready to hit the ground running when that new equipment comes to you around the world. It would save the cost, right? The expense of, say, everybody having to fly to the other side of the world to learn that new piece of equipment. The third bullet then talks about when it's impossible to recreate kind of real world conditions. So think about something like maybe like a radiation exposure. Think about an active shooter kind of scenario or an earthquake. think about some kind of war scene or battle, right? Those things are super hard or expensive to recreate, maybe even impossible, or you certainly wouldn't want to recreate them. So VR would be great for that. And finally, the last bullet then is when the scenario is difficult for the learner to envision. All right, so I mentioned being inside a piece of equipment at the beginning. Imagine like you're inside a washing machine. Maybe you're a salesperson and you really have no idea how a washing machine works. You could like be inside of it and get a sense. Or maybe you're a pill traveling down through the body. And like, what's that pill seeing as it goes down the throat and the stomach and whatnot? So it's great for things that are difficult to envision. Any questions at this point so far before we switch gears? Yeah, Scott.
What are bad uses of VR?
That is a great question because, right? Because, you know, certainly VR takes some time and money to develop. So you want to make sure, like any use case, that before you do it, that it's really a good use case, right? So if something is as simple that you could easily just read it, you should do that, right? If something doesn't need to be immersive and evoke emotion, you know, that could be another reason you don't need to do it. So I think for this, it really needs to take advantage of all the capabilities that the technology provides. We never want to pick a learning solution or a delivery method that's overkill. Like you almost want to pick the least invasive, the least expensive that will enable the learner to achieve the learning objectives, the performance objectives.
So are clients coming to you guys saying we want to use VR, or are they coming to you and asking, does this situation fit the use of VR?
We certainly hear both. I guess the one we see that sometimes deviates from really, you know, achieving the learning objectives. Sometimes they have another objective, which is attracting early on talent and showing that as an organization, they're innovative and that they're out in front. And so they're very clear about it. They just have kind of a different goal for the technology, or at least another primary or another secondary goal there. But this is a smart group of people. What else would you add? Or Devon, what would you add to my response?
Yeah, I think you know, VR isn't the first thing that you'd want to pick. You'd want to think, you know, is this something where it being completely immersive is very valuable? Is this something where, you know, the learner is moving and needs to recreate that muscle memory? Is it something where they need where the emotions of being in the scenario could be helpful for performing it correctly on the job? I think there are scenarios where VR fits in very well. But if it doesn't fit into one of those, then you know, you'd probably want to look for kind of like a traditional e-learning or instructor-led. But VR does really provide that immersive kind of top-tier learning experience.
There's some good comments in the chat. Just because you can doesn't mean that you should. Very good. And somebody else says, yeah, management by shiny object. Absolutely. I think we all run into that all the time with new learning technology.
You have a question, Mark, or comment?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that you know, I've learned or seen along the way is, you know, when we think about bad uses of VR, it kind of goes back to the Philips shows, that kind of return on investment. How long does it take to build and train up the users to having, you know, meaningful, powerful experience compared to, you know, the cost of some other approach?
Absolutely.
Well, isn't that, Devon, wouldn't you say that one of the questions I always ask is, how stable is the environment and content? Because if the clean room or whatever you're building in VR is going to change in 2 months, then it's probably not good for VR.
Yeah.
But is that something else you guys kind of also ask in your questions, is how important is the environment and does it have to be changed?
Absolutely. And even the content itself, how stable it is, or should you just do a simple written procedure until things settle down a little bit?
I came up with another example, a bad example of VR is like, oh, we're gonna, show people how to enter a client contact in Salesforce. So we're gonna use VR when you could just,
Do a
that's
simple-
overkill. It's like,
simple-
it's a computer simulation you could
Yeah.
do with e-learning. So it's one of
captivate,
those cases,
yeah.
just because you have it, like, oh, we're gonna make it more hands-on by taking something that's a computer-based thing and making it VR.
Yeah, VR also greatly benefits from scale. So for example, for some of the scenarios that we build, we have thousands or tens of thousands of participants taking it. And this allows you to have a consistent experience across all the different participants, and is something where, the upfront cost of developing the VR experience might be high, but then when you divide it among a large number of participants, it becomes a lot more affordable. So I'd say something that, you can scale, and that is fairly consistent across the different participants that you're testing on.
Yeah, nice. Great questions. Thank you, guys. All right, Devon's gonna continue here.
Yep. Yeah, so next we have good topics and industries for AR and VR. So starting with AR, you'll notice that it's well suited for maintenance and repair, field services, medical training, product design, and safety. And then if we look at VR, it's suited toward exploration, onboarding, sales and soft skills, equipment, orientation, and safety. And you'll notice that both of these technologies are beneficial for ensuring learner safety. So that's the common overlap between the two. And this is because both technologies allow the learner to simulate these dangerous scenarios without actually posing any threat to the learner. All right, before I go on to the next slide, I see Stephanie has a question.
Yeah, or more of a comment, actually. I was thinking about your industries here, but what was coming to mind for me, I formerly worked at the Nature Conservancy, and I'm thinking about donors. And when we are trying to convince people about conservation, immersing them in those experiences where they may not have an opportunity to travel to the Galapagos Islands or to, New Zealand or what have you, or wherever we're doing conservation work, or even the depths of the ocean or things of that nature. I can see how that could be very compelling for nonprofits like that. And then also St. Jude came to mind. You could really experience a pediatrics ward where maybe you wouldn't want to go and be intrusive in that space, but it would give you a chance to kind of experience or see what happens in real time in that kind of environment. So for fundraising, I could see it being very advantageous, but costly. So I'm not sure nonprofits would be able to afford it, but maybe, I don't know.
We're gonna hold on to that thought, Stephanie, because we're gonna talk about some different use cases and show some different examples. And there's ways, kind of the lowest level of VR is almost just watching a video.
Okay.
And looking all around. So those might be great uses.
Cool.
It's used for onboarding, but that might be, I love your idea of using it for that purpose.
Yeah. Is that like 360 type stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Awesome.
360-degree video, and that's much more inexpensive.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and I think, charity, philanthropy, fundraising, these are all great ways where VR can fit in because, VR gets you immersed. It gets you, in the scenario and having the emotions of being in that scenario. So if you're making a decision like, do you want to donate to a charity or provide money in fundraising, that can often be a decision that has emotional components to it. So having something that, really excites you and gets you, interested in providing support, such as a VR solution, would be very helpful there.
I know that I'm not real familiar with it because I don't work in that area, but I do have a part-time job at the Eastern Virginia Medical School. And I know that they do use the virtual reality. And I think they use it with showing maybe newcomers what the medical training would be like with the patients being simulated and things like that. But I saw something maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where they had someone on a screen, and it was something about virtual reality with that we were looking at, but I don't know or remember exactly what that was. But we didn't have a device on or anything. So that's why I'm a little confused about that. But the man, I don't know, I don't remember what the person was doing, but it was on a screen. And we were told that it was like virtual reality. It had something to do with virtual reality.
Yep. If it was on a smartphone or tablet, then it could be an augmented reality solution where, and we'll talk about this in the presentation, where you hold a screen up and it has a camera that sees the environment, but then projects a layer on top of that. And so that could definitely be useful in a med school type environment, and we'll provide some examples more later in the presentation there.
Okay.
Mark, it looks like you have a question.
Yeah, I always got questions. So I'm thinking about this and thinking about one of the earlier poll questions in terms of familiarity. I realized I probably short sold myself, because as a submarine officer in the Navy, we did a lot of training both in ship control, response to damage control issues and stuff like that in simulators. So that was the name for the big boxes, just like aviation. You go in a big box and it turns left, turns right, and up and down, tries to make you throw up and stuff like that. So definitely not AR, because there's no reality that you're layering on top of. But I'm just kind of curious if that falls into the current concept of VR. Looking at looking through goggles and stuff like that, looking at a completely artificial environment. Where does simulators kind of fall? Not that it's wildly important to make that distinction, I suppose.
So you're talking about a simulator without a headset on?
Right. Yeah. It's just like, you are in a large metal box that is actually responding as it would in a in a real world situation, but again, avoiding all the hazards of saying, oh, well, that didn't work very well. You get to learn from it rather than swim away from it.
I guess the difference is with the simulator, people have to come to the simulator and you have to have the simulator available.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to just put on the headset and it's in the virtual world.
So for our thinking here then, and for tonight, or is that VR is that much more portable, if you will, accessible device.
I think that's a good way to say it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
For example, if you want a large number of people taking this simulation, and you only have one, physical kind of testing box that you use, then, it'd take a very long time to have everyone do that. Whereas if you were taking that same training in a VR headset, you could have multiple headsets, people taking them all, simultaneously, and it would really cut down time, as well as cost. Now the benefit of maybe these physical components is that you do get a sense of touch. You can actually touch and feel yourself pressing buttons. And then also kind of the sense of balance. I've been in some of these flight simulators where the cockpit will kind of rotate and move, and you're not going to get that kind of sense of the floor is moving in a headset.
Stephanie has a thought. I see it coming.
I will say, although I went to the Van Gogh art exhibit and there was a virtual reality piece of that, and as you're walking through the exhibit, I did feel like, oh, there's stairs, I'm going down. Like there is something that your brain tricks you a little bit. It's not the same as a simulator by any means, but you can get kind of close, I think, depending on your equilibrium and all that jazz, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You feel like you're there.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome discussion. You want to keep us going, Devon?
Yeah. All right. So next, let's talk about why you would use augmented reality. So the first scenario is if you want to ensure standardized best practices. So if that's important, you might want to use augmented reality. Second, if you want to highlight tasks such as pressing a button or pulling levers or highlighting a piece of equipment. And then lastly, if overlaying feedback to the surrounding environment is important, then that's somewhere where you'd want to use augmented reality. For example, if you were in a scenario and you had a live SME connecting in and providing live feedback to what's going on in front of you, that would be a great use case for using augmented reality for on-the-job support. So now let's talk about why you would use VR. So VR is a little bit different and has a different emphasis. So first, VR helps you with focus, and this is because you feel completely immersed in the training and it limits any potential distractions. Next is that VR helps to evoke emotions. So it gives you that feeling of presence, it helps you commit skills to memory, and it activates that part of your brain, the amygdala, responsible for emotions. And then lastly is you get to practice in a safe environment. So you can do the training multiple times, you can fail, you can explore multiple solutions. But the end result is that you get to control the pace and perspective. So this really helps you to practice until fluency. So now let's go on to a few different use cases, and we'll start with augmented reality. So this first use case is actually from the Detroit Institute of Art, and it's an exhibit that incorporates augmented reality features. So in this museum, you hold up your smartphone, and when you go to the camera and you turn on the augmented reality feature, then what you can do is you can actually see within the sarcophagus, and you can see the mummy inside, and see the bones of the mummy. And this is all using a simple smartphone app. All right, this next example of augmented reality would be if you're in a foreign country and there's a sign and it's in a language that you don't know how to read. Well, you hold up your camera on the smartphone and it can instantly live translate over to a language that you do know, in this case, English. All right, and this last AR use case would be if you're a designer creating a mock-up of a building. And what you can do is you can create the mock-up, you can zoom in on each of the floors that you've designed, turn the building 360 and see every angle of it. And you can do all of this all on the table just right in front of you in your home or office. So it adds a really good level of convenience to the design phase.
So I'm curious now that we've talked about a few of these AR use cases. How can you imagine using it in your work? Anything come to mind that you think would be good use cases, not as Scott says, not so good use cases?
Okay, I have an idea that
Let's hear it.
actually I am the construction and the civil engineer, so that in, for example, if we are apply in the construction industry for the for example, the building your country, there are some corner and some place the people cannot if people read the blueprint, they cannot imagine the how can do they construct it, so that we can use AR to simulate the 3D model. And I think at that time the workers and the engineer easy understand, easy imagine, and they will be with exactly follow the design. I think so.
Very
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, if you were a construction worker or engineer out in the field and you have the blueprints and you could just either look at the blueprints and it would turn into kind of a 3D model of what you're seeing on this 2D blueprint, I think that'd be super helpful to make sure that the designs that you're building out in the field actually match what the engineer developed in the office.
Yeah.
Good. And George has shared great for training, troubleshooting, remote assistance repairs. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking in your fast food restaurant thing, if there's some error code on a piece of equipment, you know, then you just pull up your phone and it tells you what the error code is and what to do next. I mean, AR is just a digital job aid.
Yeah.
Because again, a lot of these things you're like, well, you could, if you don't have the money for AR, you could always just use a job aid. But again, I think your point was well taken, that if it's you need something to be hands free, then maybe again that AR is a good solution, and that's a restriction. But you also have to have kind of the devices available. Home Depot's been using AR for their customer support for a long time, and now they've tested it enough to now they give you access on their app maps to find stuff in the stores. So it's kind of a AR map to help you find things. So again, they used it to help their employees, and they're like, well, it's good enough now, we can give it to our customers. I haven't used it at Home Depot. I've just heard about that as an option of using kind of AR to help customers find things faster and a better customer experience.
Yeah, in the near term, having something like Google Maps on your AR device or smartphone or tablet would be super useful, and you can navigate not only kind of outside on a street where you would normally use a Google Maps, but also if you're navigating within a building, you know, you can have directions. You know, you can say, okay, I'm in a store and I want to get to a certain item in that store. Well, I just type in the item and it'll give me, okay, go to this aisle and go down. You know, look at this level and floor. So augmented reality, there's a lot of potential, you know, for navigating, for locating objects, and for giving additional information once you do find those objects.
Excellent. Any other thoughts before we move on?
Well, I think another AR use case is, can this be used by the employees as well as the customers? Because then you're building a solution for 2 people instead of 1. So that's this is a good AR use case when more than just one group of people can use it. But what were you going to say, Shalene?
I thought of some other things when I started looking on the internet about the AR and VR in my work environment. EVMS does a simulation using a device where it puts the students and standardized patients go in, and they use a device that simulates ultrasound, and they use it and move it around on your stomach and heart and different areas, and they can actually see your heart, and they can learn where to place it and how to move it and how to read it and do things like that. So that's one thing that they're doing. And they used to have, it says, an adult virtual directed learning system that was powerful 3D graphics that provides visual realism and an immersive environment. But at some point they discontinued use because parts for it weren't available until later on. So I don't know if they've gone back to using it, but that was virtual reality. So it was there, but I didn't know all of those things beforehand. So this is really good for me to be here.
Nice. Well, that's a good segue. Well, let's go on and look at a few VR use cases then. So this first ties back to what Stephanie was asking, I believe. Let me know after we talk about it a little bit. The lowest level of VR is something called 360-degree video. And this is where, you know, once you put on the headset, you can really look all the way around. That's why it's called 360. So like I could be in Paris and I could be seeing the Eiffel Tower and looking all the way around, in a bakery with my favorite baguettes. So from a work standpoint, like you see on the screen here, this is an airplane factory, but you could be miles away in the corporate headquarters office building, you know, far away from a factory, and you could put on the headset and you could, you know, immediately be kind of transported to the factory here. So I think, you know, the same thing could happen. Maybe you could be transported to a banking center or a call center or a distribution center. And I think, like Stephanie said, you know, you could be to a different location in the world from a kind of travel type of scenario. Maybe if you were a travel agent, or you could be learning about all these different destinations without actually going there. So does that tie in, do you think, Stephanie, here? Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So from a work standpoint, may be great for an onboarding kind of scenario. Now, in the next scenario, it's kind of the next level up. We call it interactive 360-degree video. So here you can see you're in a retail store. The video was actually, you know, filmed, shot in this actual store. And so the learning here is you're trying to teach, you know, retail personnel to find, you know, like rule violations. So the one that's highlighted here in the square is an untidy area, but you can imagine they might be supposed to notice maybe a drawer that's pulled out, or maybe there's a part of the store with no, you know, customer service people in it, or maybe the customer people are distracted or not paying attention, or maybe it's a fitting room, you know, that's untidy with garments everywhere. So they can literally, it lets them, if you will, like make decisions in the actual environment that they're working in. They can point or touch things. And then you see on the screen more to the right, at the end of the experience, it gives them that score about how well that they did on the experience. So a nice way to identify things in the environment you work in. Now, the next one is a little bit more immersive. So here we have potentially a doctor that's learning to use a new piece of equipment. And again, maybe this piece of equipment is so new, the doctor doesn't have it yet. But again, she wants to get up to speed. I'm guessing this piece of equipment is very, you know, manufacturer specific. So it probably needs to be a custom VR experience. So again, she can practice over and over and over again to get fluent before doing it on a real person. Another example Scott was alluding to, this here on the screen is a clean room. So you want, for example, maybe operators that work in a clean room, you want them to learn to use this same equipment and to be in the same environment where they're going to do their job. So they're going to need to learn how to move, how to communicate, how to operate the equipment, all while they're keeping, you know, proper sterilization in this clean room. It could be the same thing for a, you know, for an automotive paint clean room. All right, so now the next one is, here we have a firefighter. And you can see, it looks like, you know, he needs to learn how to use this hose. So it's certainly right. He could probably go to the parking lot of the fire station on a sunny day and learn how to use this hose. But just imagine, like Devon was talking about that emotion that it evokes. Imagine how different it's going to feel when you feel this kind of dark and intense environment that you're in. So VR, you know how we talk about how e-learning can be off the shelf or it can be custom? It's the same thing for VR. So there actually are off the shelf versions of this kind of firefighting training. So if it's really kind of generic and standard, you could use off the shelf VR. If there's something maybe unique about this region of the country and how the wind blows or how quickly things burn, maybe the hose itself is custom, then you would probably want to have custom VR. The next example here on the screen.
Before we move on, I think Stephanie has a question.
Oh, good, thank you.
Yep.
For a comment?
Sorry to interrupt your flow. I was just wondering, thinking about the smoke firefighting one, you know, right now it seems like VR is very visual. Do you know of any research that's being done or any enhancements around bringing in other senses like scent or like smell, like the smell of smoke or the sounds? Are they using some other sensory adaptations?
Yeah, I can take that. So in terms of senses that VR covers, the main one is going to be sight. You know, you have 360 view of everything that's going on. You also have a 360 audio. So for example, you know, if there's a sound source in like to your left, then you know you'll hear it to your left. It'll come in more through your left ear than your right ear. So we got spatial audio. And then that's kind of audio and video are the main things that VR headsets cover. But I've also seen kind of research into like a smell-o-vision type deal where it's you know, like it's virtual reality, but for smell, you know, you hook something up to your nostrils and it actually pumps the right smell in. So that's a really interesting example. I've seen something similar kind of for taste where it'll mix together, you know, your sweet, sour, bitter, like that, and create kind of a taste there. But then in terms of kind of touch, which is a really big one. So currently the controllers have haptic feedback, which means that you know you can make it vibrate when you touch something. So you touch something and it'll really buzz. And that's kind of similar to how on an iPhone you'll have a haptic feedback for the button. So the buttons on the iPhone actually don't press in. It just provides a haptic feedback to make you think that you're pressing it. So similar to that on the headset controllers, you'll have a vibration to make it feel like you're pushing something. So I'd say it really covers vision, also covers audio really well, and then the third one is touch.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And Scott?
Tim Querin from the Coast Guard at ISPI conference, he shared that the Coast Guard's first use of VR was to train the people in the helicopters that use the hoist that rescue people. And so they needed lots of cycles and practice to certify them, and they realized that it was costly to have actually people fly in a helicopter all the time because it takes a whole crew of two pilots and a helicopter and a rescue swimmer, and they need to train the people. They didn't need to train the pilots. They need to train the guy working the hoist. And so that became a really hands-on thing. And they've seen some good return on the investment because they can get people cycled through a lot faster and a lot cheaper. Surprisingly, VR is cheaper than flying a helicopter. So it's one of those cases where most times VR is like expensive, but it all depends on how many helicopters are available for training and stuff. Since that's, I haven't seen the return on investment data from the Coast Guard, but that one was shared by the Coast Guard on one of their first experiences with VR.
Well, and safer too, especially initially on where they're very new.
Yeah, I think the guys are always strapped into the helicopter so nobody falls out. I don't think anybody's gotten hurt in a real helicopter because they're safety conscious and they're not going to fall out because I know they're strapped in with a safety line. But true, you know, that something could go wrong, but that helps them. They eventually sign off and do real rescues in a real environment to sign off on their performance.
Well, plus you don't have to worry about the weather. You know,
true.
My son-in-law is in the Army, and he has all sorts of training that gets canceled because the weather is poor and dangerous. So this would alleviate that.
Yeah, I don't know how they simulate the weather because the Coast Guard only does rescues in bad weather. Nobody's fallen off of a boat in good weather.
That's true.
I mean, when I see the videos of the rescues, I'm like, goodness gracious, because usually it's a swimmer who jumps out of the helicopter, goes and rescues the person, and then works with the basket and the hoist. And so, again, maybe they don't have enough bad weather to practice in. It could be that situation. You know, it's like, oh, it's another nice day. We can't practice.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, Devon, I was thinking about the clean room, and part of the ROI on the clean room, and it'd be true with a lot of equipment, if you don't have to shut down the clean room or stop using the equipment to really make vaccines or make product, that's a cost savings, because otherwise you're not generating revenue if you're shutting it down to do training.
Yeah, and I was going to say also, with VR, one of the key benefits is how much you can personalize and customize it. And so, for example, in that helicopter example, if you want to switch between clear weather or really bad storm, you could do a practice mode where they're in the clear weather, just learning the ropes. And then once they really have it down packed, then you can test them out in a really, bad storm weather environment, to see how they operate under these different real world conditions.
Well, we always talk about, right, gradually increasing the level of difficulty with the practice.
Yeah.
So that could easily be done. Cool. All right. Well, we've got a couple more just VR use cases. This one with gas meters. So I guess gas meters come in all different kinds of configurations and defects. So this could be used for gas meter safety inspection training, that way you could test the worker, practice and test them on, different possible configurations of these gas meters. Again, things that they might encounter in the real world.
All right.
Devon, I think you have a few
Yep.
more.
All right. Yeah. So this next example is in recruiting. So for example, if we had someone that was thinking of a job where they experience high altitudes, where they climb a lot, then maybe it'd be really helpful for them to try out, climbing this tower in virtual reality, and then they can see what the job is like before doing it in real life. All right. Next, we have a sales example. So say we had a product that's just in one place. It can't be transported easily, and you're trying to get salespeople from their home office out to these remote locations where you have the different pieces of equipment. It'd be a lot easier to actually recreate this equipment in virtual reality. And when you recreate it, you're not just recreating the look of it, but also the functionality. So it could include those buttons, it could include levers that you have to pull. You could recreate everything that you would need in order to operate this equipment in real life, but recreate it in virtual reality, where your salespeople don't have to travel and where they can show this piece of equipment to potential clients, all within the comfort of one's office or a comfortable location that's not remote. All right, this next example is operating equipment, specifically in this case a forklift. So if you're operating this forklift, you could recreate the forklift in VR, have yourself drive around, lift stuff up and down within the forklift. And for the most part, that this would be off the shelf training, because many of the forklifts operate similarly. But if there was some sort of manufacturer specific functionality of this forklift, if it drove at a certain speed or had certain safety procedure you had to follow, then that would be somewhere where a custom solution might be beneficial. Okay, so this next example would be in oil and gas. So if you're on an oil and gas platform offshore, then what you could do is instead of flying out there and having to go in the helicopter and go off into the middle of the ocean, then what you could do is recreate this platform in virtual reality, and take your training, take your tour of the facility all in virtual reality, and then you have a lot more time, and it's a lot more safe than actually flying out to location.
So Devon's from Houston. He's actually been on one of these rigs.
Yep. And it's crazy, being out in the middle of the ocean, just surrounded by blue. All right. So this scenario is kind of our soft skills example. So for example, say you're a healthcare practitioner, so a doctor, a nurse, and you're delivering a tough message. Well, what this VR scenario would do is it would prompt you to interact with the patient in a way that is both empathetic and understanding. And when you're fully immersed in this scenario and interacting with this participant in virtual reality, then when you get to the real world, it really helps you to remember these conversations, remember these best practices, and apply them to this real world scenario.
Nice. So we've shared a number of examples. Some of you have already shared examples. Do any more kind of things that you think might really make sense in your organizations come to mind for this virtual reality piece? Does this prompt any thinking? Certainly lots of things in construction because you're actually physically doing skills.
Yes, it's a it's a really challenging question. If the business is about has a great deal of tangible inputs and outputs and products and stuff like that, you can always make a blanket statement. It's like at least worth looking at. For me, and this kind of rolls around with all the AI stuff that's in my head right now, is like, so if it's primarily a knowledge worker business, though, are we likely to find something there where AR VR makes a lot of sense? Because the physicality may not actually be a big part of what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. No, you make a good point there. Yeah, we had a group a few weeks ago. It was a lot of finance professionals, and it was the same thing. Yeah, talking through. So then maybe more again soft skills like consulting on wealth management or something like that. Yeah, well, good. Well, let's go ahead and look at some of the skills needed to get going with this technology. Oh, sorry, Devon.
All good.
I jumped in.
Yeah. So let's talk about AR and VR hardware and software. So starting off with AR hardware, we have smartphones, tablets, AR glasses and headsets, or mixed AR VR headsets. So starting off with smartphones, how they work is it's kind of like, your Apple smartphone, your Samsung, Google smartphones, and they're all already equipped to work with augmented reality. So, you take a live recording of your surrounding environment, and then what the smartphone does is it projects a 3D model of these digital assets onto your physical environment. Now, if we look at tablets, they do a very similar function, but the only thing is tablets have a larger screen for viewing and for interacting with. Now, if we look into AR glasses and headset, so for example, if we look at the bottom right picture, so this would be, your HoloLens by Microsoft. It'd be an augmented reality only device where, what you have is you have glasses and you can see through the device, and most of it is glass that you're seeing through just like it was your normal glasses. But then there are also areas where there's a 3D model projected onto your view. So in this picture here, we have a system check. So the employee is looking, at this engine, at this motor, and seeing projected onto their view kind of information about the motor that they're viewing. And this is all, in addition to all of their surrounding environment that they're seeing through the rest of the glasses. Now, lastly, if we look at the bottom left corner, we see a mixed AR VR headset. And so this is something like the MetaQuest Pro headset, or actually even the newly released or the newly announced Apple Vision Pro headset. So with this, what it has is it mostly has the virtual reality, but then it actually also captures augmented reality by having cameras on the outside of the headset that can record your outside environment and then project it onto the inside of the display. So it works in augmented reality very similar to how a smartphone or tablet does it, but it gives you this immersive view inside of a 360-degree headset. All right, next, if we go into VR hardware, we have a few different options. So in the bottom left, we have a tethered headset. On top, we have a standalone headset, and then in the bottom right is a laptop or desktop. So in the bottom left with the tethered headset, this will require a wired connection to a computer to function. So if you look at this image, you'll see, the wire is coming out the back of the headset and is attached to a computer. And then you'll also need these trackers, which you'll see on the wall, and they track your 3D position in space. And so with both the trackers and the computer, you'll notice that it's a lot less portable of an option than a standalone headset, but it does provide a lot higher, a lot better graphics and higher performance quality. Now, if we look at the standalone, which is on top, you'll notice it's a lot more mobile, a lot more portable, a lot simpler to use, but it doesn't have the same level of graphics or computation capabilities that a tether headset would have. And then lastly, if you look at the bottom right, we have laptops and desktops. And the way these work is that you can connect in to the same scenario or environment that someone is using in virtual reality. So somebody could be in a headset and you can be in the exact same scenario as them on your laptop or desktop. The only thing is you won't have the same level of immersion as somebody who was using a headset to get 360-degree view of the environment. You would only have kind of, what you would typically see on a screen in front of you, which might be kind of a 90-degree view of the environment. All right. So next, moving into software. So for AR, we have a few different options. So we have AR Kit, produced by Apple. We have AR Core, produced by Google. And these are the big two, but there's also a third option. So ZapWorks, which is produced by Zap AR. And the good thing about Zap AR is that it can function in your browser. So you don't need a whole different software system to download. Then lastly, if we look at VR software, we have a split between code-intensive software solutions and then your low-code and no-code. So looking into code-intensive, Unity is going to be your best option for VR. It has the most maturity in terms of development for virtual reality software. But then Unreal Engine also is able to produce VR software, but it just doesn't have the level of maturity, doesn't have the same tools. It's more difficult to program VR in Unreal, but the benefit is that Unreal can provide across the board better graphics. And then if we look at the low code and no code solutions, you have options like A-Frame and InstaVR, and these can help you get started, maybe develop a pilot project and get your feet wet in VR. All right.
And so then from a skill standpoint, I think when we talk about technology, I think everyone quickly gets focused on the techie role, right? Like just grab a programmer and get going. But I think we all would agree that this would be a terrible oversight, especially right as a bunch of performance consultants. It comes as no surprise that we should do a little bit of upfront work, right? So certainly first you need that performance consultant to think about the gap between current state and desired state and see if some kind of performance support or skill building solution is even right. If it is, you need an instructional designer. They need to do that audience analysis and think about those learning and performance objectives and specifically which delivery method or blend of delivery methods. You saw on the screen, right, there was some text sometimes, so that text all needs to be edited, commas, periods, capitalization. I think it's fair to say if you've ever created e-learning, it's an awful lot of detail. Well, if you've ever created virtual reality, it really is a lot of detail. What about these other roles, Devon?
Yeah. So next we have the graphic designer and 3D modeler. So these roles help to create the visual elements of the VR experience. So we can think of the 2D and 3D assets, images, animations, and all other visual elements that are engaging and effective for the learners. Next, if we look at the programmer can help create the software and code that's used to develop the VR learning experience. So they create the interactive elements of the experience, such as the user interface, interactive simulations, and other interactive features. And then lastly, if we think of the QA tester, they can help to identify and resolve any bugs, any glitches, or usability issues. And they really make sure that the learner has a smooth and enjoyable experience as they're using the software.
And certainly with all these different roles, you absolutely need a project manager to worry about quality and schedule and budget and certainly manage all the resources on that team. And we're coming to the end of the presentation here, but I think, if you want to get started with AR and VR, we absolutely recommend that you do a strategy first, you know, because as an organization, you're going to want to make some of those macro level decisions before you just kind of dive in and start building something. So you want to think about your vision. You know, if we look out a few years in our organization, what does it look like if we're using AR or VR? You want to think about those macro learning needs. Does this technology even make sense? And if it does specifically, maybe we only need AR, maybe we don't need VR based on our learning needs. With procurement, we think about, well, how are you going to get this? Are you going to buy it off the shelf? Are you going to use an external vendor to build it? Are you going to ramp up your team and try to build it internally?
And then for tech and infrastructure, you want to think about the hardware, the software, and then the delivery methods that you pick. And then also you want to make sure that you collaborate with IT to make sure that any solution that you develop works with internal systems. And then for assessment and evaluation, this fits into the broader step of taking the data that you've measured and collected throughout the VR experience. And then once you have this data, you need to unearth the significance of what you've discovered and then provide actionable feedback to the learner based on what was measured.
And then from an org structure, it kind of goes hand in hand with those decisions that you've made around procurement. Because if you're going to ramp up your internal team, you're going to need people like Devon. You're going to need those 3D graphics people and whatnot, the high-end folks. If you're going to outsource it all, you probably just need a good project manager that just is fairly familiar with technology. And then certainly an implementation plan. We know good strategies just sit on the fence or sit on the shelf, right? If there's not somebody that's worried about the action steps and the who's going to do them and by when they're going to get done. And certainly that implementation plan will help you scale. So all this will help you get started and help you scale with AR and VR. So this last screen is really just kind of a summary. It does a nice comparison of summarizes what we talked about if you compare AR and VR. But we would love to understand if, I'm curious, you know, did the light bulb go on for you during this presentation? We had certainly some of us were less experienced than others on this call tonight. So did some light bulbs go off and wheels start to get turning about how you might use this?
Yes.
Yes. And you had a lot of good ideas already, Mark. So you're saying you have even more?
Oh yeah, it's busily synthesizing, you know, this and, you know, the luxury of, you know, some varied experience over a long period of time and just, you know, just understanding, you know, continuing to understand the possibilities and stuff like that. I mean, you know, currently, you know, I don't work for anybody, nobody works for me, but I'm just, you know, it's part of keeping the brain sharp and trying to find good things to introduce into the, you know, the nonprofit and mission-centric world. So, you know, this is, I don't know where the application is yet for me, but that doesn't bother me.
Stephanie still wants to use it for orientation. Yeah, many good use cases. So the fact that you're stuck on it is a good thing. Lots of good use cases there. Just other general thoughts or comments, and certainly any other questions that come to mind here.
Well, I didn't realize it was being used in my organization so much, but I see several places where it has been used for several years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, probably right, way back, probably the flight simulator and surgical uses and military uses are probably the original ones. And
so for VR, have you guys done it both ways, or you've done the development in-house and then outsourced the development? Tell us the pros and cons of doing
yeah,
the
I mean, we
yourself.
have both in-house programmers as well as partner organization. So depending on kind of the size and the pace and the complexity of the project, we've done it both ways.
And it depends, again, you said on the complexity, if you guys can do it yourselves or if you need to outsource it. Okay.
And how fast, you know?
Good, fast, and cheap. Pick two. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
okay, that's it. Yeah, because again, there's probably lots of vendors. I didn't wander the ATD conference looking for VR vendors because they probably were there, but it's not. It's probably better one of those things you look online if you're trying to figure out who can build the VR solution you're looking for.
You know, what's tricky, I think, is to find organizations that get the performance improvement and orientation mindset and the rigorous science-based instructional design along with the learning
Yeah. So
technology.
you guys didn't mention it, but I think VR is I think part of the entire solution. There has to be some e-learning or some instruction before the practice. You just can't expect everybody to learn just through VR.
Yes,
Did you?
I agree that there's often, I mean, you want to think about your whole learning path. I mean, you're not going to learn to do your whole job in virtual reality, right? You're still going to have a very long, multiple year learning path to go.
Yeah, because you still need the demo, the practice, and the feedback. The demo could be a video. It doesn't have people don't have to. You could use the VR headsets to watch the correct way to do things, but it could just be a simple, regular video, and then your chance to practice. Now you're going to try it by putting on the headset. So it's
The other
again.
example we see is where they use the VR then for the testing piece.
Yeah, the practice and the assessment to see how well
Mhm.
you can do the things in the right order or on stuff. Yeah.
Just a comment or two.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so old that I remember when PowerPoint slides showed up in the instructional design world.
That's awesome.
And we had a couple hours of serious discussion about how should you do this? How much material should be on a slide? And we just kind of picked it up and did it. I'm listening to the VR, XR, the technology, the list of skills available. This isn't something that you just all of a sudden decide, we've been doing PowerPoint training for 30 years. We want to do a VR. That, any idea about what it would cost to staff up to try to convert a half-hour lecture into a half-hour of VR? I mean, it seems like so prohibitive at this point.
Well,
And okay, that's one. And then the other thought, I'll wait for you to respond. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, the cost doesn't need to be prohibitive. And like we said, the 360-degree video, I mean, that can be under $5,000. So that doesn't need to be prohibitive. And you could certainly, depending on the number of scenarios, the sophistication of the graphics, the amount of movement and simulation. I mean, of 10-15 minute experience could be $40,000 or $50,000. It doesn't need to be prohibitive.
What was the biggest barrier to VR, and what's the current barrier? Because it used to be the barrier was the actual headsets. They were costly and there weren't enough of them. But that used to be a barrier. But what was a barrier and what's a current barrier? I guess that's a question for Devon probably.
Yeah. So if in the past the barrier might have been the cost of the headset and the portability of the headset, but now there's been a huge amount of development in standalone headsets that only require the headset and the controllers, and so that not only makes it a lot more mobile and portable, but also decreases price. So we have the Quest 2, which is Meta's standard headset they have. I actually have it right here, Quest 2. It costs $299. So it's a lot less expensive than some of the other previous tethered headsets would have been. So in terms of cost, I think the cost is coming down a lot. And then also, I think one of in terms of nowadays, like where would the cost come from? it'd probably be less on the hardware side and more on the development side. So probably in terms of, you know, labor for the developers. And so this is one area where scale really helps, is if, you know, you create an experience, but then instead of only having it delivered to 100 people, you have it delivered to 1,000 people, you just 10x'd, you know, your efficiency there. So yeah, I'd say, you know, as the tools become more and more available for people to create these types of learning experiences, I think the cost will even continue to come down.
Yeah,
Nice.
I was thinking more about labor cost. I mean, the hardware cost, yeah, you eat it if you want to try it. I'm thinking about that list of, you got to have a software guy, you got to have an editor, you got to have a graphics guy or gal, excuse me. But I mean, those things, if you're an instructional development vendor, you know, you're staffed with those kind of people. But if I want to try to do it in my bank with my training team, forget it.
Yeah, that might be a big lift depending on, you know, again, how
Alo,
much of
ông
it,
anh về Việt Nam rồi đúng không ạ?
the criticality and whatnot.
Stephanie, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I was trying to think about this in the context of, you know, my world, which is leadership development. So from a virtual reality, and so you guys tell me, would it make sense to do something like, I think about giving managers practice doing interviews. So that can be really labor intensive. Everybody hates role play. So if we could give, I shouldn't say that, but a lot of people hate role play. So if we could give them scenarios of different kinds of candidates that they could interact with, we've talked about a lot of inanimate objects in the VR, but can you put like avatar / real looking people in them as well?
Yeah. So there's some good, you know, soft skills training, and one of them is interview training.
Yeah.
So essentially, you know, you have this avatar in front of you, and they have, you know, a dialogue tree that you can talk through. And
Yeah.
when they talk back to you, you know, they have pre-recorded audio, but then a developer can sync up the kind of lips and facial motion to match the words
Cool.
being spoken.
Watermelon, I
Um,
understand, works for everything.
Yeah. And I think going forward, one of the big advancements will be, you know, with AI, ChatGPT,
Yeah.
can you somehow automate
Right.
the responses to these questions?
Right.
And I think the issue, the where that can you know, be difficult can be, okay, you can reproduce maybe the text that the person responds, but then translating that both into audio and then
Yeah.
also, you know, recreating the facial motions to match that. I think it'll be a couple years before kind of AI gets integrated in here.
Okay.
But right now there's a good amount in terms of kind of like a dialogue tree type soft skills.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think about it in terms of practice coaching as well, right? Problem solving and coaching, or progressive discipline kind of conversations, those kinds of things, right?
There's also services where it's similar to what Devon is describing, but there's a real actor. There's real talent behind the audio.
Yeah.
Or behind the avatar, I should say. So you're really, you know, there's a real person that's deciding what to say, but
Yes.
you feel like you're doing the role play with an avatar.
I see. Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. Okay.
The research shows it's pretty powerful.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Thank you.
Any parting thoughts? Or I know, Scott, we're getting to the end of our time together.
No, yeah. We'll send the deck out to people. Obviously, Lisa, you'll send me the deck because it has the good tables and another well-designed deck. We'll definitely send that out to everybody in that. Obviously, do you have your contact information? You have your contact slide on here?
Couple more.
There it is. So please reach out and connect with Lisa and Devon on LinkedIn. You know, and I definitely follow some of the stuff they're doing. They do some great blogs, and they're a great group just to keep in touch with what's new and what's going on. I want to thank again for them bringing their expertise and just, kind of almost a back to basics. AR VR has been around for, you would say, like 10 years, but now it's, now it's actually more, scalable and giving us that path and their learned experiences from this. So thanks again for that. I'll be sending that deck out tomorrow with this, and I'll send a link to the recording because maybe you want to share it with somebody. You're like, oh, here's a good recording and stuff like that. I'll have that link for that recording tomorrow morning. So
Yeah, and
thanks
if you're-
everyone.
If you're in Michigan, come by and experience it for yourself. We'd love
Oh, that would be fun.
love to host you.
That would be real fun.
Yeah, and so like she said, like, get a chance to go to Best Buy, go to some places where you can just experience the headsets. My son's got the Oculus one, the first one like 3 years ago, which is fun to play around with too.
Yeah.
And I keep asking, you get a new one? He's like, no, I think I'm okay. And then he uses a headset for his FPV drone, which is real similar too. So it's an interesting way. But thanks everybody for your participation and being a part of this. And I'll send out the recording in the deck tomorrow.
And lovely to see everyone. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good. Thanks
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye everyone. Thank you very much. Nice to meet all of you.